Hello everyone, Kenty Tiger here with Bengali Engineering and Play. We are back in Space Engineers. We're kind of continuing on with this modular utility vessel thing. One of the things that I mentioned at the very beginning was really totally having screwed up, and so normally when I do these kinds of videos, so we're building something, right? Really wanted to try and keep things completely generic, which is really to say completely vanilla. Now, sometimes I run into problems. So when I started building this, as you guys remember from the very beginning, was I was using a lot of Kenty blocks. And Kenty blocks, some of them are very overpowered, and some of them are rather overpowered for a reason, because I just got tired of, I wanted to just play. I wanted to get around some of the game limitations, whether realistic or not, and just have some fun. Thus the Kenty blocks were born. So in a lot of cases where that comes kind of leads to problems is when I want to post the various items, I guess, up on the workshop. And the problem really becomes apparent when, obviously, when you try and load these in, then you get the warning that that mod is not available, blah, 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 which then means I need to either upload the world, so you can have all the different mods that are in the world, or I come up with something a bit more generic, which would then let everyone do what they really want to do. So what I set out to do here is get this as close to vanilla as possible. So these were the two original modules, and what I have gone through and done off screen here is change these to vanilla. And I use that a little bit loosely because there are two things that you're probably going to notice right off the bat that are obviously not vanilla. Now, one of the things is this scaffold type framing that you see here. This is a mod that is literally called scaffolding, and what the mod author did, and I won't necessarily plug them here while I'm on live here, but they basically took one of the models, one of the construction models, and I think this is the first construction model, and basically turned it into a finished block. So this is a light armor block that is basically a finished of the first model. So it looks like scaffolding. And the reason this was done is that, as you've probably all seen, there's a lot of builds out there that actually used incomplete blocks to do what they wanted to do, and it looks great. No doubt about that. You know, it adds an ambiance, an aesthetic that is really cool in a lot of ways. But if you have any of these automatic building mechanisms, like the nanite refinery, like the build and repair mod, both of which are extremely good, I highly recommend either one of them. The problem is either one of those, depending on what your default settings are, they will see an unfinished block and say, oh, that's unfinished, I should finish it for you. And then all of a sudden you lose all that aesthetics that you wanted by way of it completing the block for you. And I know on the build and repair mod, there is a way, there's an ignore color, and you can actually color these to that ignore color, and it really does add some extreme flexibility to how you do things. So you can actually get around that kind of thing by using that ignore color. And obviously, with an unfinished block, you never see the color, the final color. So it really doesn't matter. You never actually see that in the build. The problem is if you make something vanilla and somebody else loads it into their world and they have settings that are a little different, then of course your unfinished blocks become finished. So same problem. So I started using this scaffolding mod, and now they're finished blocks. So none of the automatic build systems affect them. So they remain this way. So I use this. So I call it vanilla, but it's actually not really vanilla. There are some issues. One mod there. The other mod here is the Prosimian armored conveyors. Which of course are these two glass blocks here that you see. So these are airtight. I tested pretty much all of these yesterday and discovered they were indeed airtight. So the downside here is that not vanilla, right? So I could replace these really on both ends. I could replace these with conveyor junctions. The downside is that conveyor junctions, and I'm not sure why this is. In fact, I'm not sure that this has been verified, but apparently every cargo junction, just because it exists, because of what it does in, out, in 6 directions, it takes a certain amount of CPU cycles, calculations, that sort of thing, every cycle, which is really to say every time the game goes through and does what it calculates and all that there's a certain performance hit, whether it be minuscule or not, that every one of those junctions takes up. So I don't know if that's true. That's the rumors that I've heard. And if that's the case, then would this introduce a performance hit? Anyway, having kind of thought about those sorts of things, discussed a little bit within my own brain, I was thinking that I really want to get these as close to generic as possible. So how do I go about doing that? So this one over here is as generic as it can get. So this is stock gyros, stock batteries, stock reactors. Everything about this one, except for the scaffolding at this point, is stock. Same for this. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to change these frames, because again, these were the original frames. I have not altered the frames at all. And then there is this one that is just the frame. And what I had intended here, so I modified this one a little bit. Obviously I removed the cargo carriers, the cargo containers, and the idea behind this one was you remove the containers, so I create a generic frame that I can use to build whatever, and it's just a total generic frame. That's all it was for. So the only thing I have not done with this one, obviously we still have the scaffolding underneath. Do I change away from the scaffolding, or do I leave the scaffolding in there? My inclination is to leave the scaffolding in there. I've actually done that on one other build I did that I called vanilla, but obviously not, because it's got that scaffolding in there. And what I ended up doing is just putting a link within the description, which you can now do on the Steam Workshop. You can actually list the required mods. And I consider that kind of a required mod. And I know not everybody likes you know, loading in 800,000 different mods, but you know, there's a certain aesthetic with these, and again, I think I've explained why I use them, why they're useful. Now there is another mod out there that is, I think it's called the Unfinished Blocks mod, and I have not used that yet, but it actually has a lot of the basic building mods, blocks, in an unfinished form, but they're finished, so they're unfinished finished. And the idea behind that is exactly what the same exact concept as the scaffolding mod is, that you know there are automatic welders out there that will seek out and weld up unfinished blocks, which means if you're trying to do something that's that unfinished look, that's purely aesthetic value, then those mods will screw that up for you. So good stuff overall. So I have not used that one, but so anyway, generic frame here. So what I want to do is modify these two frames to be really as close to vanilla as possible. So anyway, that's what this particular video is really about. So unfortunately, the only option I have, and discounting strength and all that sort of thing, is to put in the conveyor junction. So those are really the only options I have. So let me get on my my tiger orange color here, and then there we go. So there's that one, and then that one. And what I have to do on this end is actually kind of the same concept here. I'm going to have to nuke this battery, which is unfortunate, but just reality here. What I'm going to do here before I do that is look at this gyro, and this gyro may actually just say gyro do, which is all fine and dandy. So in this case, battery 1. So for those of you who have played the game quite a bit, batteries, this happens to be the jump module. Off and off. Let me go ahead and change. Well, actually, let me change out this gyro first. So 3. I'm going to put the gyro right there, so it's out of the way. We'll nuke that gyro, and then this gyro actually becomes. So we have a conveyor, and oops, that was not what I wanted to do there. The auto rotate that doesn't really auto rotate. Randomly rotates is what that really means. All right, so I have. So the idea here is obviously the generic frame here. What I want to do is connect the ends together, and the reason I wanted to connect the ends together was so you could move. In this case, we have the jump drive, which obviously does not have a conveyor going through it. So to connect the two ends, I have to have another way of doing that, and the only way really to do that is by having a generic connector in the middle there on the bottom of the frame. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. So that way the two connectors are indeed connected. Now I do lose the connector on the bottom, which is actually fine. I don't really mind doing that. All right, so let me get back into kind of what I was doing here to clean up everything. So the gyroscope here is actually the aft gyroscope. How do I know that? Because it's facing the aft end of the ship. The other one is the forward, and how do I differentiate between the two? I differentiate between the two because if you'll see here, I'm on the aft end. And how do I know I'm on the aft end? Because my beacon over here is on the front. Okay, so right now it's the way everything's facing, but you know, in the end, my beacon is on the front. Is that an arbitrary distinction? Yes, absolutely it is. I admit it. So this one should say aft. If I did everything correctly, yes I did. Okay, so gyroscopes, gyros, and I'm going to call this, this is the jump module. Now normally I would not differentiate. I would just go ahead and say that all of these gyros, and they'll end up in the same group when you link everything together. I can't really even begin to say why I changed my mind on that, because of course originally that was one of the things that I was doing, was just, you know, having the having all of the group names being the same. So jump module, the batteries in this case, I could probably delete that one. Containers, so let me jump module, save, so we'll delete the containers. Containers are going to be a little more challenging, and the reactors. So one of the things I was babbling about and then got sidetracked, so SC Toolbox, the Space Engineers Toolbox. If you're not familiar with this, this is over on the Midspace website. Absolutely an incredible mod, or incredible piece of software, rather. It will take your SC save games and actually be able to go into, dare I call it, the track and sector level, and really modify anything you want virtually. And you can go into all the different, so for example in this particular instance, what I have is my saved world with all of these, let me back out of here, with all of these grids. Okay, there's actually 5 grids on here. I know you're seeing 4. So this is the tractor. There's a generic cargo box under here, which eventually we will disconnect because it's now a lot different than what the generic cargo box is. So we would remove that and make it into something a little different. And so the tractor 1, the cargo box 2, and then there's these 3 things here. So there's the frame, now a generic frame that is almost entirely vanilla except for the prosimian armored conveyors and the scaffolding there, and then these 2 generic. So obviously the cargo container and then the jump drive module. So these were the original modules that just got converted over to as close to vanilla as we can. And we'll get a little closer to that ideal here as we go. So obviously I'm going to have to chop out the battery and the gyro, and the gyro goes where the battery is now, and then we connect these across. So we basically take the frame and move it over there. Now could I do effectively the same thing by taking this generic thing over here and modifying it and then adding the cargo containers? Yes, absolutely, I could do that, and I probably will, because I'm a lazy bum. It's going to be much easier to add 3 blocks than it is to change 20. So I will probably end up doing that and then renaming everything because it's easier. Why work smarter, not harder, right? Work smarter, not harder. All right. So where was I going with all this? So in the case of this world, I had all of the original modules as they were, the tractor, everything. I saved the game in Space Engineers, exited Space Engineers, load up Space Engineers Toolbox, and it loads this world with all of the grids. I can go into each individual grid and change out, for example, Kenti batteries. So I highlight all the Kenti batteries, I select replace, and replace it with a generic, vanilla battery. And it is in the same location and at the same rotation as the Kenti battery was. It just simply replaces it. So you don't have to take everything apart and put it all back together. You just replace it, done. So that's what I did. I basically replaced all of the Kenti blocks with generic vanilla blocks. And once I'm done with that, I save, I come back into the game, and then I can rework everything. Now, the problem is, obviously, because the Kenti blocks are gone, if I did any naming conventions or ownership or that sort of thing, the ownership is lost. So one of the things you saw me doing here was redoing some of these names and such, because we lost those various names. So what do I need to do? Well, one of the things that I'm ultimately going to have to do, I'm going to put a Kenti antenna on here, and that's a temporary antenna. The reason why is because I want to use the HUD to identify what some of these things are. I have containers and reactors. Containers are easy, but the reactors are not easy, so I'm going to put those on my HUD so I can actually work with those guys. Okay, so gyros, jump modules, these are already selected, but I need to correct, it's a little OCD thing there, sorry. Jump modules. Okay, so I can take these off the toolbar and off the terminal, turn those off. Cargo containers. So we have now put the reactors on the HUD so I can identify forward and aft. So the small reactor is actually aft, which means the other one is forward. This one, because I can get to it, is cargo container, large, mid, and then this one becomes cargo container, large, forward. Now, why do I change the name? Isn't that a big waste of time? Yes, in certain perspectives it is. However, because SE alphabetizes this list now, so for example, you see this is unalphabetized, right? Because I just changed the names of something. But let me show you. I'm going to escape, coming out of here. I'm going to go right back into control panel. Okay, so a K. And you'll notice, hey, it just changed the order. They're all alphabetized now. So if I have large containers, small containers, medium containers, whatever, all of a sudden they're alphabetized, which means all of my cargo containers, whether they be large, small, or in between, are suddenly listed as cargo containers. So I'm using the alphabetize feature here, function, to really kind of help me organize things. Now, one of the things that was in here was the jump module containers. So because I created that group, I'm going to go ahead and reuse that group. So I turn them off on the toolbar. You can't actually physically turn containers off because they're not powered. So toolbar off and terminal off, and they'll vanish there. So the connector, that's actually going to go away when I put the conveyors all the way across. So the large antenna was also go away. The jump drive should be 100%. Current input 0, so it's got to be 100%. So the small reactor is the aft reactor in this case. Now that I've identified that, so this is small aft. the reactor 2. So, and the reactors is the same story as I just explained with the cargo containers. When I name it reactor, then I can do large, small, whatever, and you can see everything reactor in the list all together because they're all alphabetized now. Okay, reactors small is there. I'm going to rename this to small. This is the jump module. Save. I'm going to delete the reactors small. And then I'm going to go back into my reactors jump. I'm going to take it off the toolbar. I need the inventory because obviously I'm putting stuff into those, uranium, and take it off. The only other thing I need to do is the parachutes. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is change to jump module. Now why do I do that? Because if I have that in a generic group, it's bolted to the bottom of the tractor and I click on my parachutes and deploy. I'm actually deploying the ones on the module as well as the ones on the tractor. I don't want to do that. So I would just want to launch the parachutes on the tractor. I changed my naming conventions for sake of now I know exactly what groups are where. Alright, so the connector is going to go away, the jump drive obviously is going to be there, and the large antenna is going to go away. One of the things I need to do with the antenna, or the reactors there, is turn them off on the HUD, so I don't need those anymore now that I've identified what they are. Alright, so if I back off of this guy, I should see only the beacon and the antenna. And the antenna is white because it is not owned by anybody. It's blue when it is owned by you or your faction. Alright, so let us go ahead and nuke that one. So, on this one is almost done here. I've created all my various groups as I wanted to do. So the only thing left here to do, this is more for convention than anything else. Obviously, most people can do pretty much whatever they want. I need to find, where is my beacon? I got myself upside down here. There's my beacon. And here again is just a total OCD thing. So conveyor, I'm going to turn the conveyor right side up relative to the orientation. Okay, so I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, a total OCD moment, but this is the forward portion because there's the beacon up there, so I want that facing up. Okay, so up relative in space, yes, granted. Alright, and then back to my conveyor tubes, which now is going to go bing, like that. They all turn green, so now I have connected this thing end to end, and if I really wanted to, I could break this scaffolding in the middle and put connectors on the side. And of course, just like we ran into on the tractor over here, with these little humps that went over the top, same kind of a thing here. I can't put a connector here even though I want to put a connector there, because I would have to loop it up and over to connect the connector. Okay, not a pun on words there. Connect the connector. So in this case, I have a generic connection point, so I could actually put connectors off to the side. Just one of the challenges of the modules. So when these modules hit the ground, there's nothing to do on the bottom. So that's the downside to these things. Now, one of the things that you saw on, let me see, I think it was in episode 7, it was a little shorter episode, where I actually did some testing. These were of the Kenti versions, so obviously we can do some more testing and figure things out. So we can retest the parachutes, and I was not entirely impressed with how the parachutes worked. They worked, but the problem was these modules hit the ground, and they hit the ground at about 4 meters per second where they hit the ice. And it's a bug that I've seen before. I'm calling it a bug, but it's like the voxels interact with the blocks. The blocks actually fall through the voxel into the voxels themselves, and then the game freaks out, and all the blocks are just inherently destroyed. And one of the ways around that, of course, is to have destructible blocks turned off, or if you use the admin helper commands, then you can actually set individual grids to be non-destructible. Now these modules are not set to destructible, which is to say they are destructible. So when they land, as you saw in the test the other day, or the other episode, then it landed. I don't want to say fine, because 4 meters per second is still 4 meters per second. But landed and hit pretty good. And they sat there for a second, like trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do, and then blew up. So I lost one of the cargo containers and about half of the frame. All right, so we are just going to delete this one because this is a generic cargo frame, but the only difference between this one and the generic frame is the cargo containers. So rather than alter that one dramatically, we're just going to do that here. All right. So one of the things you notice is that the reactors are not working, so there's no way currently to charge the batteries. The batteries are almost exhausted, and when they are, everything is going to go dead here. So the question is, do I have uranium anywhere? And what I think I'm going to do is we will go ahead and copy this particular thing. Move that over to the other end. All right, so get them all facing the same direction. A little further down. So generic frame, generic frame. Now what I should have done is swapped out all this underside stuff before I did that. So oops. Alright. So in this case, number 4 here, I'm going to go back to the conveyor. I'm going to spin this around just to see if... Alright, and sorry, another OCD moment. Facing it the correct direction. So we're deleting almost all the way across. We're putting this in the center. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. There's that one. And that one. And undo that and put that there. Alright. So they're all facing the same direction. Pretty easy swap out. Then we do a number 4 again. We get to the conveyor tube itself, and then string them all the way across. Bink. All done, and they all turn green, connected. Everything is happy. And we can actually do the exact same thing here. For change my angles to make this a little easier to do. So again, we're deleting here. For some of you who might ask, is how am I able to do all of this. This one, is this one backwards? This one's backwards. Oh, this is backwards. Oops. How am I able to do all of this? Space Master. Space Master is your friend. Now, I can either do the total OCD moment and swap that one out, which technically I should be able to do because I'm not doing it on 1, 2, and 3. Everything is still connected. The problem when you're deleting blocks, of course, is there is no undo. Why the hell is there no undo? Nobody can figure that out. And 2. One, 2, 3. So this is the bottom, or the limit of the 1, and 1, 2. So we got the center here. We change that back into a conveyor tube, and then go all the way across, and done. All right. So we have, short of the scaffolding, converted this frame entirely into a generic vanilla frame. So I'm going to do a B on that one, Control B rather. This module frame, as you can see in the very tiny picture there, has the prosimian thing, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. Yes. And then we're going to change details and rename, and this now becomes my new frame X3. Now, why do I call that an X3? 3 cargo containers was the concept here. All right. Cancel. Now, one of the issues here, remember we said the centerline thrusters. So I'm going to have to redo everything I did with thrusters, because I actually changed out all the thrusters. These are now all generic vanilla thrusters. So whether this unit actually functions or not, I have absolutely no idea. We'll have to test and find out whether it works. Obviously, the thrust to weight ratio becomes a very critical thing. Now, here's the problem, which is one of the reasons why I started into this video and will continue doing this video. This is basically, if we want to entitle this video as to any particular thing, is the vanillaizing. I'm going to go ahead and use that word. That's a created word, I think. Vanillaizing of the former Kenti blocks. So we have been reasonably successful in that. So this is now entirely vanilla, less scaffolding. This is entirely vanilla, less scaffolding, because it's a copy of this one, basically. And then this one is a generic frame with now entirely vanilla products on it. So these are now entirely vanilla, less the scaffolding. Obviously, the scaffolding are still there. So as vanilla as you can be. So basically you could load one mod and bring all of these into your world successfally. And I, again, have one other mod in the world that is like that in my workshop that does use these things. No way around them, I don't think. You know, having a finished block that looks like what it does. So, okay, babble, babble, babble. Here's the problem. There are 2 blocks left, 2 types of blocks left on the tractor here that are Kenti blocks. So I had my overpowered hydrogen tanks, which is to say oversized 1x2x1 hydrogen tanks, and my super gas generators. So there's 4 of those, and there are 14 tanks. So here's the problem. If I change those guys out to vanilla, I need to change my design. Why is that? Because my blocks are too long versus the tanks, which are 3x3x3. So basically I have a 3 by 3 by 2 space that I need to convert into a 3 by 3 by 3 space. Kind of a little bit of a challenge. So how do I go about doing that? The only way I can think of to do that is literally to cut the end off the ship, pull it out, change the guts in the core, and then put the end of the ship back on. So basically a cut and paste, chop, cut and paste. Now that we can actually somewhat do that. The cutting and pasting is always a bit problematic when it comes to Keen. I don't know why the cutting and pasting is such an evolution, and as you get to larger and larger objects, larger and larger grids, it becomes even more problematic. Alright, so one of the things we need to do is the jump drive here, the cargo container here. So let me go over to, Control 8. Let me get a generic cargo container. Let me find the cargo containers. Here we go. There's a large cargo container. This is a vanilla. So I've put in all the reactors. All the gyros are now there, and the large antenna is a Kenti large antenna. So let's grab this and put it into slot 1 just because. Okay, and one of the things I want to do is spin this thing around and make not that way. Make sure this is facing the way that I want it to be facing. Alright, so and again, this is forward, and it is lined up where I want it. This is midships, and this is aft. So given those 3 that we have just tossed in there, okay, here's my large cargo containers. So we're going to do cargo container, tack, large, and this one is the forward container. So that's a Control C, highlight, Control C, Control A, Control V. This is mid, Control A, Control V, and this is aft. We don't really need to do this, but we're going to do containers because we did it on the jump module, cargo module. Save. We're going to do a highlight and then Control A to select everything. We're going to change ownership over to me. Yes. Make sure it's share with faction just in case you are indeed working with everybody else. We're going to go back into containers now. So we verify that they are highlighted as we expected. We turn them off in the toolbar because there's no reason to have them in there. There's nothing you can manipulate in there, and then turn them off in the terminal. So we have a module frame, so now we change the module frame to actually be a cargo module, and then we go into info. We're going to change the same thing here, cargo module, turn off the frame, do an OK, so that changes the name of this guy. We're going to escape. Come back in, we should see that this has changed names. This name is what is in the info there. Alright, so reactors. So now we're going to start changing these names to match what it is now, because I copied from the frame. So save, batteries can delete, connectors. Cargo module, delete the frame, do a save, click on the module, delete. Containers, we already did that one. Gyros, update the name. Cargo, when you do a save, it creates another group that's identical. Gyros, oops, messed that one up, didn't I? Save. So now we have actually 3 groups. So we delete that group. Then we go into the gyros frame, delete that group. Parachutes. So let me not do that second time. Cargo. Save. Go down to the parachutes module frame and delete that one. And finally we get to our reactors cargo module. Why does that look wrong? Module. And then back to frame and delete. So we should have cargo module here. Verify once more. Cargo module. Inventory. Alright, so it looks like we now have a generic vanilla cargo module. Now what I'm going to do in here, just to differentiate, no, I'm not, because this is vanilla and I'll end up putting this in my vanilla folder. So one more verification. Control A. We verify that the owner is me, shared with faction. And then we have successfully converted our cargo module. So we're going to go ahead and Control B this. Control Bravo. We see a cargo module. So here's the old cargo module, which when I took the picture of that one was underneath the machine. Yes, delete that. Cargo module is the new one. Details, rename, and get rid of this _1. OK. Close. Alright, so now that the cargo module is done, we can actually put this on the tractor if we want. I'm going to get that out of the way right now, so there's a delete. One of the other things that I want to make sure I believe I did, so it's an F10. The frame is indeed the generic frame. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and Control X this, which of course is going to leave a copy on the board just because I'm going to go ahead and do module frame and replace with clipboard. Alright, one of the things we're going to do here, and of course the tractor in many ways was never finished. And what do I mean by never finished? Well, I did not program the any of the toolbars on the cockpit, the internal flight seat. Okay, so I never finished that. So what am I doing here? I want to disconnect the cargo container. Why am I disconnecting the cargo container? It's the old one. Okay, so even though it's semi-generic, it actually has some elements that I do not want. So turn it off. Oops. Oh darn. Get out of the seat before I move the mouse. Okay, but it is disconnected. You can see yellow and yellow. So we're going to go ahead and delete that. Alright, so this has opened up the opportunity for me to get in underneath and actually do some stuff. So this was somewhat purposeful in what I wanted to do here. So this entire undercarriage being open can actually lead to me being able to fix some things. But we're still in the same problem of I have 4 slots here, and I actually technically need 5 because I've got a 3x3x3 tank that has to go into the middle of this, where I have a 3x3x2 space now. Okay, because my oxygen generators, gaseous generators, and tanks are 2 long, not 3 long like the vanilla tank. Now, the other side of this is a hydrogen-powered craft, which means those 2 tanks, even as large as they are never, I don't think they will ever get me to the atmosphere or landed. I just don't think there's enough hydrogen there, which means it becomes a drill of do you have enough generation? And because the vanilla generators, the answer is no. All right, so this is my jump drive module. I don't know if I have changed that. So now that this is what it is, jump module, can't really tell, but we're going to go ahead and delete the original jump module. So delete, yes, and we're going to rename this module. So details and rename, we're going to get rid of that _1. That has now become our jump module. Okay, so that is, again, as vanilla as it can possibly be, less my scaffolding underneath. All right, going to do the same thing, X and delete, get rid of that, and then we are working entirely on this craft here. All right, so what are we going to do? Got a couple methodologies here that we can play with. The real question is a tank forward and aft going to be enough? And my vote is nope. So what can we do? Well, we can add another tank on each end, which means we would have 4 large hydrogen tanks, because there are no small hydrogen tanks in vanilla, and then we have to figure out how to add in our oxygen generators, or rather our gaseous generators. All right, so because see, this is problematic no matter how you slice it. It really is, because if I cut the ship in half right through the middle here, I will accomplish a lot, yes. I will keep my assemblies forward and aft, which is actually a good thing. All right. Let us do a Control-C, which then copies this into the world. And we move this over here. Why did I do a copy? Because inevitably, when you chop something apart, something happens that you did not expect and things go boom. So I want a copy of the original, and in fact I'm going to do a Control-B on this guy. This guy is going to have a strange name, I think. Huh, okay, nope, it doesn't. Okay, so the MEV tractor is just the tractor and the miner now, in fact. Because the miner is still actually stuck to its underside back here. In case you missed that, so there's the miner. So on there like a limpet mine. In fact, in this case, I need to remove that because I'm going to cut right through it if I don't. So let me go ahead and do this. I'll go to 2. My thrusters are off 8. I need to turn the gyros on, I can turn the antennas on and then disconnect. And then I'm going to get out of here because I'm using the Space Master anyway. I'm going to go ahead and do a Control X, which will only highlight this, and then boom, gone. Oh, and I'm out of power in there. So I'm running on batteries, which is not a big deal. Alright. Here's the challenges. I'm going to lose my antenna, which is not a big deal. Alright. So, here's what I'm going to do is, I'm going to grab a generic whatever. Right click, yeah, that is the run I want. Right click, I'm going to go up and over, I'm going to chop through the very center of this and out the other side. So this is either going to end catastrophically or actually work out. Bing! Yeah, catastrophic. So explain that. And of course it falls off and breaks off. So I'm going to do a Space Master points, biggest grids, next, 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 stop, 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 stop. Okay, makes no sense, but alright, so teleport here, player control, 0. Player control, escape, 0. Alright, so couldn't begin to explain what the hell that was, but again, space engineers being space engineers. So, this is probably going to totally screw me, but I'm going to do a Control X. Remove this. I'm going to do a Space Master once again. Biggest grids first, which is going to put me back to where I wanted to be over here. So teleport here, player control. And the goal here, now that I've chopped my ship apart, is to paste in this thing that zoomed off to the universe. So get it put back. Okay, so here we go, back in the direction that I wanted it to be. Go ahead and paste it back into the world. Why those are still doing what they're doing, I have no idea. Don't pretend to guess. Alright, so one of the things I had here, and this was entirely because of those hydrogen tanks being end-to-end, there were no connectors on the side, meant that some of the other aspects of this, I had to create this spider web, all encompassing, all connecting kind of a thing. Same thing on this back portion here. So one of the things that I need to do in the process of all of this, now this back piece kind of has to remain here. And why do I say that? Because let me do Alt F5 or Shift F5 to quick save. This forward and aft feed comes in at the top and then goes down. So ultimately all of this stuff needs to remain here. But if you recall, the tanks, in this case, the hydrogen tanks, are only going to be feeding from that center port. There's no, 9 ports on the end. So what do I need to do? What I can do here, so remember this is this feeding in here. What I do want to do is, without totally screwing too many things up, so 8, darn it, 0, control 8, because that's my generic bar. I need a oxygen generator. There's my oxygen generator. Kenti oxygen generator. No, there's the oxygen generator. So my generic oxygen generators, right? Control 1. So I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to delete this one. Okay. Oh damn. And my gyro. So I will go back here and delete the gyros as well. What I have to be careful of in this case is to make sure I don't break the ship apart. So I want to make sure I have enough of the framing remaining intact that I don't completely screw everything up. So I'm going to go ahead and delete gyro, because those are going to cause me problems, and I probably can do the very same thing back here, although I can't really get to them easily. That's probably actually what caused these up here to go, careening off into the universe, was when the gyros went, because I think the gyros were right here. So when I broke that up, then the gyros did weird things. But physics has been overhauled. All right. So I still have the framing over the top remaining. So I'm going to delete. I removed those gyros from my control 8, didn't I? 0G gyro, which is there. Gyroscopes. Alright, so I have batteries here, and normally I do not like putting gyroscopes onto batteries. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to rename the gyroscopes, mostly because I don't think anybody will look. So even though my OCD has a little bit of a problem with that, why does it matter? Alright, so the other thing I kind of like, so let me do this, is the windows here. So I'm going to face these windows aft, so you can see this. So this is the front port side and the front starboard side. Alright, so we're going to do the renaming here. So this is oxygen generator. I'm going to rename this to gas generator, because it is a gas generator. It does not just generate oxygen. This is forward port. The other generator I just put in is right there. This is a gas generator, and this is forward starboard. I don't know which cargo container is what. That group will probably disappear shortly. This is mostly just because I want to get things off my screen. So the batteries, battery 1, batteries, tractor, save, get them off the toolbar, off the terminal, and then we have all these hydrogen thrusters. And I'm going to do effectively the same thing I did here. We're going to call those, these are all the small thrusters. So thrusters, small main. Actually, that is a generic group name, just because I want to get rid of them, get them off my screen, so I can work a little easier here. Okay, the gyroscopes, the gas generators, the small cargo containers, small reactor. So I lost it, but I didn't. It's actually on the front frame, which is still should be intact. So why did I just do all that? Convenience. Okay, so all of my thruster groups actually vanished. At least I think they vanished. Let's actually look. Oh, they might. Oh, they might have remained. Okay, SE toolbox had a problem before with those guys, but maybe not. It looks like maybe I don't have to change some of that stuff. All right, so the good news is this is my forward container here. So get my mouse back on the screen. Container, small forward, which actually this was fuel ice forward. Let's go ahead and change this, even though we're still moving stuff around, to a me and a share with faction. Connectors, all right. So we get in here. Now we have connected the frame top and bottom. So I can change these. I do not. Okay, so we're going vanilla, right? We're going vanilla. So for conveyor to conveyor junction, this is forward. So I'm getting rid of that one, getting rid of that one, and in fact, okay, this may or may not cause problems. And that. Now, if I were being really intelligent, I'd actually put in fact, I probably should put in, is this the front or the back? This is the front. Alright, so this is, we'll call this forward lower. Let me go back over to Control 8, generic. I want a small cargo container. And the reason I'm doing small cargo container, I want to face that the correct direction too. Bing, bing, which is actually not facing the same direction as the other one, so oh well. And we will call this cargo container small, oops, fuel ice forward upper. So this should be now fuel ice forward upper, and this, I hope, is fuel ice forward lower. Okay, why did I do that? Well, because small containers are small containers. They don't contain very much. So when I'm wanting to put a lot of ice and stuff in these things, that's going to be a real problem. All right, so I have mostly eliminated the non-vanilla stuff out of there. So let's do that here. And of course, here's the problem. I'm going to lose my forward landing gear, which didn't want to do, but no way around it because I'm deleting that. So G, landing gear, land gear. So we'll haul this back in. We'll go ahead and put that on number 9. All right, generic. What I could do here, let me do a 3, turn on N. Okay, so the mirroring actually is still working, so we can use that to our advantage. 4. All right, that is back. This is there, and this is there. All right, so those are changed, which means those are changed. So this is mostly corrected. The challenge is actually this right here, because these are, of course, not generic. So the only way to do anything here would be all right, so this I'm going to change out with that. This I'm going to change out with one of these, and then I'm going to put in elbow, elbow, and conveyor, because that's all we have in terms of generic. All right, and 4. Do we have any options here? No, we really don't. All right, so that's there, that's there, eliminate, eliminate. So that's there, that's there. That's there. Now ideally would be given the performance hit or the rumor of performance hit, I would rather put just the generic cargo tubes here. But if we think about things in terms of structural design, we have this entire rib here between the two as being a little bit weak. So I think somewhat of a redesign is appropriate. And here's what I want to do. The question is, so this is connected to this is connected to this. So we should not have any major issues here. But here's what I'm going to do. On my 6 screen, we have a number 7. I'm going to take this corner piece out. I'm going to actually put in there and delete, add. Okay, so I'm going to change this to a 5 wide, which is going to add a whole lot more framing into this. I'm going to delete all of this framing all the way through. Delete. Alright, and then I'm going to change this one out to be a full block. Which just change the other side, which means this can change to full blocks all the way down. I'm going to stop with that one because I need to change this one out to a full block as well. And then block. Alright, now with a little bit more frame, then I feel a bit more comfortable in adding in my generic piping. There we go. Alright, so even though I have not gotten into this and torn this aft end apart, which we do definitely need to do. Okay, I'm guessing those are just on fire because of what happened there. Alright, so I think I have successfully done that there. So, 3 is my generic hydrogen tank. I think I'm going to have to do 2 tanks. So 2 tanks being 2 tanks, there is 2 tanks. Now, how do we deal with everything here? I truly have no idea. What I think I am going to do is I'm going to do some generic things here that might appear to be a bit odd. Okay, I'm turning on mirroring. The reason I'm turning on mirroring is because I want to be able to work on both sides simultaneously. Okay, so what am I doing here? I am adding in framing to hold everything together. That's all this was for. So these are going to go away eventually, but I want to just hold all of the different pieces together without breaking everything. So the first thing I'm going to do is work on all this area, which is effectively going to be 2 and 4, oops, 3 and 4 rather, and conveyor junction. Okay, so I'm going to look at the conveyor junction here and make sure I'm facing it the right way. Yes, I know, total OCD consideration there. There it is. All right, there, and there, here, and here. Depending on where we put the gyro, we may or may not have an adequate connection point there. I should, because the main thruster will be down here. That's the idea anyway. Now the question is, now that we have 2 tanks here, are we going to have 2 thrusters? And I really truly have no idea. Okay, I have greatly strayed into the next hour, which I did not intend to do, so my apologies for those of you who try and keep everything in an hour. I've totally screwed you up with that. So, great place for me to sign off. So this is Kenty Tiger, and we will see you next time.